Hi, my name is Perky Hamilton, your host of the Staying Healthy Today show. This is a show where we bring you key experts and topics in the fields of nutrition, prevention, integrative, and lifestyle medicine for the individual, society, and the world. Today, we're going to start off with a little bit of the worldly stuff and work backwards. There wasn't one main theme, except that it seemed like when I keep collating the information together, um, I came up with some really heavy things that I just wanted to go through and put into perspective. You know, when you work on somebody's individual health, I'm sitting across the table and I'm trying to help them with a joint pain or headaches or something like that. And then you see the world on the brink of things that could be really a problem. It's hard to know where to put your energy. So that's why I mentioned these things. And I'd start off with it was a Memorial Day. And so Memorial Day for me in America is a very powerful day. I usually go to some military cemetery, excuse me, and just wonder why I didn't have to go to war in one sense, and then or I missed it, and so many people have died. And then in that context, uh, right now in Ukraine and in Russia, the war going on, that has put us on the brink of nuclear war. Uh, and we are closer to the clock by I think it's a union of concerned scientists than we've ever been before. And way back 30, 40 years ago, I actually got arrested for civil disobedience that was related to the nuclear weapons. So to even contemplate the use of those uh, and do it frivolously is insanity by any politician. Let me put it this way. And I hope that and pray that President Trump has the courage to just stop the funding of the war because NATO is really, and we were NATO, we're the funders of the war and why it keeps going. And if we stop, the killing will stop, and then there'll have to be, the negotiations for what's left. But we can't have that escalate into a nuclear war. The other So that was Memorial Day, looking at the graves, the concern about every day. I think about Ukraine. And then on a more national level, there was a great Senate testimony on September 21st, or testimony or uh, hearing with Senator Ron Johnson getting together medical professionals and also some politicians to talk about the actual hiding of information that from our government that the COVID vaccine caused myocarditis. And I've highlighted some things in this newsletter where you can hear, in particular, Dr. Peter McCullough, cardiologist, epidemiologist, um, internist, who does a rebuttal because one of the senators brought in a sign that says COVID vaccine saved 3 million lives. And his rebuttal, and I've highlighted it, just listen to, 6 minutes to 9 minutes, and you can see in the newsletter, it cuts to the chase, and it's so powerful. And the simple thing is that, you know, the, the drug companies don't even make a claim that the COVID vaccine saved lives. That's number one. Number two, the deaths went down from COVID vaccine during COVID because, first of all, people started getting it, and there was some vaccines. But between the two, you start to create a herd immunity, so deaths were going to come down. Two is with Operation Warp Speed, there were things like monoclonal antibodies, and then there were physicians like myself, I don't know, thousands, maybe hundreds, 500 to 1,000 physicians who were treating early COVID with repurposed drugs. And they were helping, they were keeping people out of hospitals. And three is when you throw a vaccine into an epidemic, what the virus does is it's going to create more variances. And they're going to be easier to catch, but they're going to be less lethal because they don't want to kill the host. So that's another reason why it was less lethal with time. And when you put those things together, that's why the incidence of death went down, not because of that combination, not because of the COVID vaccine. In fact, there's a sign posted up behind Senator Blumenthal of 3 million lives saved. And when you hear Dr. McCullough go through the science, and he knows the articles much better than I do, and it's very powerful. It's worth watching. So it's worth watching there, and I try and highlight the link so you can go there. And then VAERS, that was something we went to a lot during COVID, the vaccine adverse events reporting system, and it used to be the gold standard of how you would look for a signal that something was wrong with a drug or a vaccine. Well, it got ignored, and it still is ignored by the government because it's too outrageous to look at. And so I went back and looked at, and I put a link into the VAERS red box analysis, and you'll just see, for 30 years, again, I've seen this 100 times, but there's nothing, hardly ever a blip on the line as far as severe um, uh, drug and vaccine reactions that don't get taken off the market. And then all of a sudden, 2021 and 2021 and 22, and it just skyrockets. And you'll see all the vaccine deaths and injuries that are reported. And these are underreported because physicians have to do this. So it's estimated that the real statistics are about 30 times greater than what's on VAERS. But go look at it again. Click on the US territories. That's for the United States. Very, very powerful. And then an area that is of great interest of mine is the live organ harvesting that's going on in communist China. And they usually do it. One group that's been picked on is the Falun Dafa. They're a Buddhist type group that originally in the late 1980s and early 1990s, they grew to over 100 million people practicing. It's kind of like Tai Chi in the park type of thing. But they got to, and they're very peaceful, nonviolent, and they got so big that the Chinese party flipped. Instead of encouraging it, which they used to do, they began to attack them and put them in prisons with the Uyghurs and the Tibetans for slave labor and such. But now they use them for live organ harvesting, if you can believe that. And there's legislation right now that's going on to help stop that. But it's just uncanny. And so there's a link to that there. And then the last part, aside from all the nutrition stuff that's in the middle of all this, is I was born in Hong Kong, so I'm very aware of what's happening in Hong Kong as far as the national security apparatus squeezing down since Communist China has decided to do that. And I even heard today that people are getting, put in jail for celebrating Tiananmen Square, which is today, or excuse me, it was yesterday, the anniversary since 1989. In 1989, Tiananmen Square occurred on January 4th, 3rd and 4th, and that was squashed by the Chinese Communist Party violently. That was a freedom movement. So they can't even protest that or have a memorial in Hong Kong, and that's just in the last recent years. And so I wrote about that in the context of I was born in Hong Kong. My grandfather helped build the Panama Canal. I'll tie this together. And my mother was born in the Canal Zone, went to Balboa High School, and I found her yearbook on the internet and the picture of my mother when she's in high school. And the reason that I bring that up is because one of the Substacks that I listen to is called Michael's Letter, and he's an former Green Beret Special Forces, and then he went back and was a combat correspondent in really active areas in the Middle East wars, and he is world renowned. Michael Yon is his name, Y-O-N. He's world renowned for his expertise on international migration. So when we hear of the politics and of people coming over the border, he's down live many times in Panama. And you hear about the Darien Gap, where Colombia, then there's a Darien Gap into Panama. And that's where it's a treacherous route. Many things happen to the refugees that come up, horrible things, from death to trauma to poisoning, I mean, to bites to rape to just terrible things. And so he's down in the Darien Gap. And so, as you know, President Trump has shut the border down and done a very good job at our southern border. But the real cause of it, and this is where Michael Young consistently talks about, and that's why I link some of his, is that the real way to stop that is that in the International Office of Migration, that is in Panama City, is that the old Fort Clayton are called the City of Knowledge now. And the United Nations runs intentionally that campaign, and we pay for it. Our government paid for this mass migration up, which not only caused so much harm to so many people, but let people over the border to where we have a serious terrorist problem. And you will see, if you ever follow Michael, all the different ethnicities and cultures that have crossed our border, many of military age, just and gone up from here. And then also the Chinese Communist presence, where there's actually two Hong Kong companies that manage either side of the canal, and uh, Hong Kong is now, part of communist China, and no business can run without okay from the canal. So Chinese presence there is very powerful, and that's a choke point for trade and many things. So that's the outside of the newsletter. Okay. But they all came together, and I wanted to put them together. So there's links there, and you can scan through everything you want. And the reason I do links is so people don't have to read if they don't want to read, but they can get an idea from the letter. So the other things that happen in this newsletter, we talk about brain health, from overworking affects the actual structure of the brain, to diet and brain health, walnuts, green tea, and greens. Uh, I did a thing on elimination diets. I do a lot of them, but sometimes they can backfire. Endometriosis in the gut, I think, is a fabulous topic to think about, how what happens in your gut can affect the inner lining of the uterus. And hands are needed for strength. I did a little bit of a video on that, but there's ways to strengthen them. And then I have all kinds of ivermectin stories because I use a lot of that. But ivermectin and inflammation for fibromyalgia, autoimmune gastritis, and then obviously the cancer treatment with ivermectin, fenbendazole, or mebendazole. I give more case studies of that in this newsletter. And then there's just a lot on the vaccines. Why they are not being taken off the market is very difficult to understand, especially with RFK, Jay Bhattacharya. Um, I forget the other gentleman's name, that are the heads of, um, the Health and Human Services. So anyway, that's the newsletter. They're all linked, and they're, all go to sources. My name is Kirk Hamilton. I hope you have a nice day, and I hope there's a lot of stuff you can learn from. And pray for peace. Talk to you soon.